Hello there, welcome to the channel. This is Nerd.World History, and today's video is one of my trio of Santa themed videos that I'm doing, one for each of my three channels. If you want to see the other two, they are on my other channels, Nerd.World and Nerd.World Films, which are linked in the description below. I'll try and remember to link the other videos, but I'll probably forget, but you'll be able to find them on the channels. They were released at the same time as this one. One is about television Santas, the other is about movie Santas, and how awesome they are. This video, however, in case you didn't know from clicking on the title, is about the history of Kris Kringle, St. Nicholas Santa Claus. Who was he? Was he real? Did he exist? Does he live up to legend? How did he become Santa? Those are all themes we're going to explore in this video. Before we get started though, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Tell me what you think, or did you know any of this about the origins of Santa Claus? To find the origin of Santa Claus, we've got to go way back in history, all the way back to the late 3rd century-ish. We don't know exactly when he was born, but he was believed to have been born in the year 290 AD. He was a Christian monk from Turkey. He was known for being very generous, kind to children. He eventually became the patron saint of children and sailors, and we'll get to why sailors in a little while. He was known or believed to have been born quite wealthy, but given up all of his worldly possessions to charity, and then spent his life helping the homeless, doing deeds such as he was known for preventing the sale of 3 young girls into slavery and prostitution by their father by giving each one of them a dowry so that they could buy their way into marriage instead of having to leave their home and become slaves and prostitutes. Deeds like this earned him a reputation as being a giver and a kindly saint of a man, who upon his death would be sainted. Over the years his legend would grow, as more and more people spoke of him and his deeds. They would be embellished and they would grow over time. By the Middle Ages, particularly by the Renaissance, his, or at least parts of his skeleton, had been scattered across Europe. These would become venerated holy relics, put in churches mostly in Italy. He would become a known saint. And he would also, by the Renaissance, be one of the most popular saints in Europe at the time, mostly because of his kindly reputation and, by now, a very good image of a gentleman who was more Christian than Christian could be. In addition to this, over the years, he would eventually reach the Americas in the 1770s, when it would become known that Dutch families in New York would be reported by a newspaper venerating his death, which is, although not exactly known, it is generally believed for about the last 1,000 years that he died on December 6th, and that's usually considered to be the day of his death and a day of celebration for Santa Claus, which is the Dutch name for Saint Nicholas. In America, the American tongue changed that to Santa Claus, which is now what he's widely, globally known as. It also was the form of a sort of caricature of him made in 1809, which was an image of a jolly, pudgy man who gave gifts to children called Santa Claus. This was obviously the Americanized version, which would become the commercialized version of this man. He was also, in those stories, a Dutchman. Of course, Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, was actually Turkish by birth. Our modern idea of Santa, as you may have noticed from the title card I've been using, was a little different from what was originally seen as Santa. Of course, many different images of St. Nicholas have been depicted throughout time. It's not like there's a photograph of him. Some of the ancient pictures are typical saint images, robes, beards, sometimes a halo, etc. But the modern image, red coat, fur trimming, pudgy, big white beard, that begins in the late 19th century, in the 1880s specifically. Again, a cartoonist for advertisements drew this image of the poultry Santa we now know and love and all grew up with. But before that, as Christmas began to be a revived and more commercially acceptable holiday, from about the 1820s onwards, a combination of different things began to see a rise in the popularity of Santas. Things like the Salvation Army sending men out dressed as Santa, ringing bells on the streets of American cities, which is a popular, almost stereotypical image now of Christmas in America. To see your white bearded man ringing a bell asking for donations on street corners. That's been around since the 19th century. From the 1820s to the 1880s, though, there were many different interpretations of Santa with different images. But the modern image, as I said, came from the 1880s, and it became popularized in Christmas cards, wrapping paper, you name it, teddies, images on toys, etc. Now, that is the modern image of Santa that has carried on now for well over 100 years. As I touched on before, Saint Nicholas is more than just the saint of children. He was known for his piety and his kindness and his generosity in life, which is how he earned a reputation. He was known to be very kind to children, which is how his association with children and gift giving comes along, because he was always giving things away. He gave away his fortune, he was always willing to help. Now, as folklore built up around him over the centuries and was built up, one such part of that folklore was that he once saved a group of sailors in their ship from a storm. How exactly, who knows? Miracles. But ever since then he became the patron saint of sailors. He's also the patron saint of wolves, and for that matter, pawnbrokers. So he's a few things. He's not just what he was, what we know him as today. Which, speaking of which, the man we know today as Santa Claus. Now, to look at where the tradition of him being a gift giver comes from, again, we've got to start looking into more modern interpretations. It wasn't something he was associated with much further back in history, aside from being pious and giving, as many saints were. But why is he so synonymous with it is down to, again, satirical comics and poems dating mostly from the early 19th century. Specifically, in 1809, Washington Irving portrayed St. Nicholas in The History of New York as a portly Dutchman who flew the skis in a wagon dropping gifts down chimneys. Later, in another New Yorker story in 1823, Clement Clarke Moore penned a poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, which was dedicated to his 3 daughters, which traded the wagon for a sleigh drawn by 8 tiny reindeer. This began the real modern image of him, which again later combined with the image of him in a red coat, big beard, all the rest of it, we get our modern image of St. Nicholas. As for the Kris Kringle name, as a side note, he got the Kris Kringle name because of a movie, Miracle on 34th Street, made in the 1930s, where the main character was called Kris Kringle, and a little girl in the film believes that Kris Kringle is actually Santa Claus. The name's kind of stuck in association with him. And there we have the history of Santa Claus and St. Nicholas in brief. Of course, St. Nicholas himself would have had a very rich and diverse history. He's mostly, as I said, known as a saint who was known for his giving and generous nature and always being a good man, a jolly and loving Christian in both Catholic faith and in Orthodox Eastern Christian religions. He is associated with this. He has, of course, his feast day, which is considered to be, believed to be by both Orthodoxies of Christianity, the 6th of December, which is traditionally a feast day and was also a traditional day to get married at one point. Nowadays, of course, he is more associated directly with Christmas and giving presents to good children on Christmas Eve. You can see how, taking all these different parts of his personality, the gift giver, the piety, the good nature, the jolly suit, the Sinterklaas, jolly Dutchman, the various cartoon strips and various other commercial uses of him in the 19th century all eventually culminated to create the jolly, portly, white-bearded, red-coated, with white trimmings man who lives at the North Pole with his army of elves, delivering presents to children on Christmas Eve who've all been good. That's mostly who he is now. But of course, at one time in history, he was a real man with a real history. I hope you found this video interesting. I actually found the researching of it quite interesting. I only knew bits and pieces of the St. Nicholas story. I didn't actually know he was from the late 3rd century. I thought he was more recent than that. I thought he was more early medieval. Shows you learn something every day. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. Please check out my other 2 channels. They're in the descriptions below. As I said, there's 2 other videos that I'm releasing in conjunction with this one as part of a triumvirate of videos across my 3 channels, all dedicated to Santa Claus. Please check them out. I'll try and remember to link them. That said, thank you, and bye-bye.